Alright guys, so today we're doing an Elden Ring review, and it's going to be a partial review because I haven't beat the game. I've beat through the second boss, and if you know the map a bit, I've completed that first starting region, the southern region, and then that forest to the east, and a wee bit of the swamps over to the east of that, where you fight the dude in the desert, you know what I'm talking about. So that's where I am. I'm about 20 hours in, right? And I'm just at a point where I'm stuck and I'm pissed off. So I'm gonna go ahead and make my review, say what I gotta say, and then I'm gonna restart and see if that solves the problem that I'm having. And then we'll come back, and if it does solve the problem, which we'll get to in a minute, I'll remake a video. But if not, then this will be it. So since this game's been out for over a month at this point, I'm not gonna bother going through and talking about bugs and graphics and all of that stuff. I mean, the game looks fine. All of the bugs at this point are patched out. What I really want to talk about is just the gameplay, because there's a lot to talk about there, and I could rant about that for like 20 minutes. And I don't want this video to be too long, because if I do ever finish the game, I'll make a long review. Let me go ahead and start out by saying that pretty much everything you hear about this game is true. Right now, I will say that the like, oh, game of the year, best game ever, 10 out of 10. No. Alright? It's good. It's not that good. Alright? There's definitely some flaws here and there. Alright? But, yeah, like, the story is pretty. That's probably the weakest part of everything. That's not to say that the story is bad, just everything else is really good. The gameplay, obviously, you know, it's your melee combat, and I guess kind of ranged combat if you're a mage or if you're using a crossbow or one of those other weapons. But the combat is your typical Souls game from software type combat. You roll a lot, and, you know, depending on your class, I block and counter a lot. And then you got your light and heavy attacks and spells and consumables and all of that crap that you switch between while fighting the normal, you know, enemies around the world, and then during your boss fights. So let's talk about those boss fights. And while I've done 2 of the big main boss fights in those regions I already mentioned, I've done everything other than, again, that partial region to the furthest east with the desert. We talked about it. Other than that, I've done everything in those regions, right? So I've done a lot of bosses and mini bosses and whatever you want to call it, right? And so they, you know, depending on your class and how overpowered or underpowered you're going into them, they range from literally impossible, like definitely come back later, you literally cannot beat this, to incredibly easy, right? Like, for example, the 2 main bosses, I was so overpowered by the time I got to them. I believe the second one took me 2 tries, and the first one took me 3 tries. Right? They weren't too difficult. Now, the open world stuff, the hidden locations with the mini bosses, I'm spending an hour and a half on those. But the difficulty, I think it works well, at least at the point I'm at. I've watched a lot of this game. I'm pretty certain I've watched almost every single boss fight at this point. And just different people, you know, people who are really good and people like me who are really bad. And so I have a fair share of knowledge of how it progresses in difficulty. And I think, you know, if these people are just doing their main story stuff and not going around and exploring everything, and to an extent, you kind of have to. It kind of forces that, and we'll get into that in a minute. But if you're just doing your main story stuff, that's the difficulty that you want to play at. That's definitely an option. It's a lot harder. But if you actually go around and explore, like with any game ever, you're going to be more overpowered, and it's going to be a lot easier. Now, that being said, it's not going to be easy. Like I said, it's still going to take you multiple tries, but it is easier. Now, let me get into my problem, and probably the best and worst parts of the game. So with any, you know, open world RPG, drip lord type game, you got your loot, right? And so I chose, what is it, the Vagabond, the very first class, the knight looking guy, right? And so here's my problem. First of all, just drip wise, I feel like, and just, showing off, all of the magic characters got the cool shit. There's some cool melee weapons here and there, but all the magic characters really got all the cool stuff, alright? So that's my number one, which, that's fine, right? It is what it is, right? You can, and I mean, magic was broken, and they've nerfed it a bit, but I still feel like that's definitely the more fun way to play, and I might be going that way when I replay through the game. But, like I said, I'm about 20 hours into the game, and so there's a lot of loot. I've seen it. Like I said, I've watched a lot of videos on this game. I've probably watched more than I've played at this point. And there's a lot of really cool loot and a lot of drip, and there's a lot of it. It's spread out, like there's a list of it. It's long, of all of the pieces of armor and gear that you can get, and you can upgrade it and put different Ashes of War on it and all that shit, so it's different every single time, blah blah blah. But here's my problem. Like I said, 20 hours in, done all of the stuff that I've mentioned. I'm still using the default stuff that I started with. And this is why I'm restarting, because I must be missing something, or I skipped over a tutorial that I don't understand, or my game is broken or something, because every single piece of armor I pick up is worse than the armor that I have. And the only armor I've equipped that was better is that first area, when you walk past the dude, the tree guy on the horse, and there's that little outpost before the bridge with the knights. I have their armor on. That's the best armor I've come across. And I've done Stormvale Castle. I've done all of that. I've all the stuff where there's just I'm significantly under leveled for a lot of the stuff that I'm doing. And I'm not getting gear. I don't know what it is. I mean, all of my weapons suck, and I'm getting a lot of weapons, but they're trash, but I am getting a lot of weapons. But gear-wise, I'm just not getting good gear. And I don't know if you just have to be buying stuff from the vendor, and maybe that's what I'm missing, or if I feel like, if you're doing just the main boss fights and just doing the story and progressing that way, that's fine. You might have to buy stuff from the vendor. But at the point where I'm at, where I'm doing every single open world activity and going into all these hidden caves and fighting all these mini bosses, I feel like I should be getting better gear. Like I said, I'm getting weapons that I have to have 950 fucking dexterity for, that I'm nowhere close to using because I'm under leveled. But just, it's armor. That is my problem. I mean, I'm, like I said, watched a lot of the game, and there's people that, they're lower levels than me, doing harder stuff than I am, and they're doing more damage and taking less damage. Right? I mean, just normal ass enemies, I'm getting my ass beat. And it's not like, oh, get good, you're bad at the game. That's not it. I mean, it takes, you gotta die a couple times to fucking learn their attack patterns and all that good shit. But for the most part, it's not that I'm bad, that's the problem. It's that I'm just significantly under-equipped for what I'm doing, and I don't know how to solve that problem. So like I said, I'm gonna restart, and hopefully choose a different class, and that solves my problem. Or maybe I missed a tutorial that was super important. Like I said, I don't know. But that's my main problem with the game. Really, that's my only problem with the game. My only other problem with the game is the way you can kind of cheese stuff. So if you don't know, right, and this isn't by any fault of the developers, right, it's a problem they're going to have with everything. Every game ever that has any type of difficulty setting at all is going to have guides and bugs where you can just beat stuff in cheap ways. But I've seemed to found that, I tend to do this a lot, and not even on purpose, right? Because you can go look up how to beat every single boss as a level 1, just stun locking them in a corner, or using freaking rot, hitting them twice, and then just running away while they bleed out the whole fight, right? There's videos of how to do that. But what I'm talking about is, for just an easy example, one of the spirits you get early on in the game is the dogs, right? And so you summon 3 dogs. They're relatively weak, but they attack really quickly, just like the enemy dogs that attack you. And so any enemy that can be stunned by an attack, which for the most part is all of them, except for a few bosses during certain phases, you can just stun lock an enemy. For example, the first and second boss, Margaret and what's the other one? Fucking Garfield. I know that's not his name, but I know it starts with a G. Anyways, specifically the second boss with those dogs and the AI companion that they give you the option, and these are optional, but they give you the option to use before going into the fight. They do probably the first half of the fight for you, and then you have to fight out the second half, at least in my experience. And the same thing like with Margaret in the first fight. You use those dogs and the AI companion, and you can just stun lock them, let them do like half the damage, and then you come in for the second half. But again, that's all optional. That's a whole debate if you should be using the spirits at all, blah blah blah. But anyways, so that's my review. Alright, the game's really good. I just think that I'm doing something wrong that's stopping me from enjoying it. Because, I like open world stuff and going around discovering all that stuff. That's fine. I don't have a problem with that. The difficulty, other than the fact that I'm insanely underleveled, it's not that hard, right? Like, I can beat it. I'm playing fucking Cuphead right now, and that's way harder. But for the most part, everything here is great. But it's just, like I said, something that I must be doing wrong, or just not understanding, or just there's something wrong with my class, or something, right? So, if I had to give this a rating now, and this won't be, more than likely won't be a final rating, I'll probably come back to it once I have time to play it again. And that's the other thing, is I don't got time like I used to. Like when I played Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and I made that review, and I put 111 hours in, and just flew through that, right? I don't have that type of time. I get like 4 hours maybe to play a day, if that. And so, and with this, just, in the beginning I was fine, but I'm at the point where I'm not getting gear, and within 30 minutes to an hour I just get unmotivated to play, because I'm just, at this point, I've gone so far without getting gear that normal enemies, right, and this is how I know there's something wrong, and I didn't want to fucking rant about this, but it is what it is. Right, I know there's something wrong because, one, I watch other people and I see they have better stuff than me in literally 2 hours of gameplay. But the fact that because I'm getting better weapons and I'm naturally upgrading the stats that you need to use those weapons, I'm 2 to 3 shotting an enemy like I should be. A normal enemy, not a boss, obviously. But my problem is that the amount of damage I'm taking, right? The amount of damage that I take from a normal enemy is the amount other people I've seen take from a boss, right? Like, I'm two-shotting enemies as well as they're two-shotting me, and my health bar is fucking huge. Alright, I don't know what it is. I don't know. But like I said, I'm gonna restart, and I don't want to give this a score, and I didn't want to do a whole thing. I don't have like my titles and any of that shit planned out. But if I had to give this a number right now, I'm sitting between a 6 and a 7. I know it's good, right? It's better than, it's a 7, right? Even with how much this game is pissing me off, and I'm literally gonna have to restart, and I can't play it because I just don't understand why the fuck I'm not getting armor. But it's a 7 out of 10, right? It's good. It pretty much does everything right, except for a few things here and there. But it works, right? It's good. Now, if you're not having this problem, you're probably sitting, depending on what class you picked and how you like it, at like an 8 or a 9, which is totally understandable, right? I'm not saying that the game cannot be those high scores. I don't think it's 10, but I'm not saying that you can't have that opinion of the game, and it's just your fucking opinion, so you can think whatever the hell you want. But for me, with the way things are working out and just the whole system, it's at a 7 right now. Like I said, we'll replay it, we'll come back, we'll regather our thoughts, hopefully be getting better gear than what I'm having right now, and we'll come back, because like, when the game's working, and I'm fighting an enemy that's not too incredibly overpowered for me. And, like, I mean, I got through pretty much everything except for that eastern desert region, swampy desert region, right? Completely with that default gear, relatively fine. Like, for example, the knight in the castle, in Stormville Castle, if you know what I'm talking about, after you get through all the guys with the explosive barrels. Not even a boss, not even really a mini boss. I don't even know if he has a health bar. I don't think he does. I think he's just a normal enemy. That shit took me like 2 hours. Just because I get 1-2 hit. Like, real easy. Just because my armor's so bad. But even that, it's fun. Right? When it's working, it's fun. That's my point. And if you like these types of games, you're gonna like this one. If you don't, you don't. If you don't want to have to sit there and think, okay, this is my first attempt. Literally, on boss fights, on my first attempt, I don't even swing. I just watch, right? And so, you have to, it's one of those types of games. And this really should be at the beginning if you haven't played this type of game before, but it is what it is at this point. But, you gotta go into a boss fight, and it's okay, he's gonna do an underhand, an overhand. Then you have a chance to do 2 light attacks, and an underhand, an overhand, and underhand. Then you have a chance to do a heavy attack and a light attack. And you gotta, memorize and plan out this whole thing, set your rules for the fight. All that's great. It works really well. But, just the gear, this is pissing me off talking about it, alright? We'll make another video after I play the game. We'll see you in a month.